13,000 chickens locked in but still laying their eggs. At Fluffett's farm in Hampshire, they're doing everything they can to stay in business. But with the restaurants and hotel industry closed again, the owners say it's hard to believe things will ever get back to normal.
It's been a very, very challenging year. I've never known a year quite like it. We used to sort of plan ahead, and now we sort of live a day at a time almost. We knock on the door so they know we're coming.
For the chickens, it's bird flu that's keeping them stuck in the hen house. They'll be out in April. For the restaurants and hotels, however, who make up most of the farm's trade, the time frame for normality is far less certain. What's it like as a supplier?
It's dreadful. I mean, I deliver to a lovely New Forest town, Lyndhurst, in the heart of the New Forest, and it's all cafes that cater for, you know, to the tourists, and the butcher, the pharmacy, and the small supermarket are the only shops on that whole strip that are still open. I just don't know financially how they can sort of sustain it.
Today's figures showed that in November the hospitality industry shrank 44%, laying bare again how it faced the harshest restrictions and suffered the most damage. Overall, after 6 months of growth, GDP staggered backwards by 2.6%, better than some expectations, but leaving many worried about what the current lockdown will do to the UK economy.
There was a really good feeling going out of the November lockdown into December. I think it's been quite a shock, really, because we don't know where it ends now.
Up the road is The Pig, part of a boutique hotel chain which focuses on local sourcing, including Ben's eggs. Here, the bar has been empty since Christmas, and the table and chairs just sit stacked, gathering dust. The owner has been described as one of Britain's most influential hoteliers, but he's struggling to get the government to listen.
The industry operates on pretty slim margins. For many, many businesses in the sector, they sit right on the edge of viability, just about hanging on through all the sort of measures, and literally they're mortgaged or borrowed up to the hilt.
Hudson wants a hospitality minister and government and an extension of the VAT cut. He says it's consumer businesses like his that will power the recovery.
It's an industry that can turn on pretty much overnight to 100 miles an hour. We don't require masses of capital expenditure in government infrastructure or anything like that. We just need a level playing field.
Are you being valued in that way, do you think?
I don't think we are at the moment.
In the UK, 3.2 million people work in hospitality. That's 1 in 10 jobs across the whole workforce. But the pandemic has already seen 750,000 posts lost in the sector, and much of those jobs will be young, urban and from ethnic minorities.
I feel very responsible for 1,000 people. You know, 1 minute they're locked down, the next minute they're on full duty, they've got to turn on the charm and all of that. A lot of them are mentally bruised, shall we say, from all of this.
And it's not just his staff he's worried about, there's also his suppliers.
We operate in rural locations and we're probably the largest employer in each of those locations. We support the farmer, the fisherman, the window cleaner, the taxi driver, you name it. We're the engine that creates prosperity for our business.
Now?
Well, if it goes on forever, I mean, yes, I don't know what is the point.
Some economists say this is the point. A roaring 20s bounce back in growth, they say, is possible if the vaccine does its job. That may seem incredible walking through the empty streets of Britain, but hidden in today's figures is evidence of a rush of house building and mortgage approvals at the highest level since the credit boom of 2007. For anyone linked to the leisure economy, without more help from the Chancellor, such pockets of economic expansion may seem for the birds.
Well, I'm joined now by the Shadow Chancellor, Anneliese Dodds. Anneliese Dodds, thanks for joining us. Some economists suggest that these figures aren't as bleak, actually, as they could have been, and that we have a spending spree to look forward to after lockdown and with vaccinations being rolled out, etc. What's your analysis?
Good evening. I mean, we do know that actually more people, very sadly, have lost income during this crisis than have been able to amass those savings. So, of course, I really hope that we will see a resumption of spending, but there are very, very large numbers of people who actually have had to tighten their belts. Of course, we also have a big council tax rise coming in from government. We also have from them, of course, that freeze on wages for people like police officers, for example, and firefighters, and a cut in universal credit, which of course so many families are reliant on now. So there's a big question about how we can make sure people's confidence and ability to spend is maintained, but also a big question about how we can ensure those businesses will actually still be there to serve people into the future. And I really recognised what was presented in your clip a moment ago. I've spoken to so many businesses in that kind of a situation.
Well, yes, as we saw in Helio's report, hospitality has been particularly hard hit, the beauty industry too. What would you specifically do then to help those industries if you had the keys to number 11?
So I think the Chancellor must act responsibly now. He must recognise that we need to retain that economic capacity. We've already had record redundancies. The UK's had the worst recession of any major economy. We must focus now on preserving jobs and keeping businesses operating. What does that mean in concrete terms? First, it means having a much longer term perspective. So the Chancellor has said that he will only be coming back into Parliament at the beginning of March to provide certainty around issues like wage support, like incentives to keep people in work, like the business rates, holiday and so forth. That's going to be too late for many businesses that will already have had to shed even more jobs by that point. So I've been saying to the Chancellor, please come earlier, provide that certainty so that employers can keep those people on, keep those jobs. Because once somebody becomes unemployed, not only does that have a really bad impact on their lifetime earnings, tends to pull them down, but of course it has a big impact on our economy too. It means that people have to claim different forms of benefits and so on and so forth. So much more needs to be done now to preserve our economic capacity.
Okay, you gave a speech this week outlining your planned economic policies. It's been noted that you used the word responsible 23 times. Are you suggesting that your predecessor, John McDonnell's policies were irresponsible?
No, I'm suggesting that very, very sadly, the current government's policies have not been responsible, and indeed those which have been put forward by Conservative ministers over the last 10 years. We entered this crisis, very sadly, lacking resilience, not just in our public services, but also, in fact, in our economy. We had very high levels, for example, of insecure, unstable work. That's caused a lot of problems when it's come to the impact of this virus. And then during this crisis, we've seen very, very last minute decision making. And I do feel that's irresponsible because it's not been focused on preserving those jobs. You know, the focus seems to have been on media hits and political issues rather than really focusing on making sure that our economy is protected. And
well,
you know, as I said, we've just, sorry, go on.
Now, what I was going to say is the government is spending an awful lot of money, more than any recent Labour government ever has. Are you promising to outspend them?
No, it's not about the amount of money that is being spent. And I mean, you're right, the Chancellor often trumpets the fact that he has spent £280 billion on his plan for jobs, and yet we've seen record redundancies. We've seen that incredibly steep recession. The big question is whether that money is being spent in the right direction, whether it's targeted at really protecting those jobs. And so far from government, for example, we haven't seen them tying economic support to jobs. So we have actually seen with the furlough scheme, some employers using that scheme to pay out people's redundancies rather than to keep them in work. That hasn't happened in many other countries. And we've had so many gaps in support for people, particularly the self-employed.
Thank you.
Again, it hasn't been so much of a problem
I'm sorry to
elsewhere.
interrupt you. I think you've made your point. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Sure.